The air in the state courthouse hummed with a quiet, restless energy. Sunlight streamed through the towering arched windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor where lawyers in sharp suits hurried past with purpose. Tucked away on a heavy oak bench sat 11-year-old Zoe Hayes, her bright pink sneakers a splash of color in a world of muted grays and browns. She was tracing the intricate patterns on the floor with her eyes while her best friend, Liam, fidgeted beside her. To pass the time, Zoe pointed to a wall lined with the stern portraits of former judges. "See that empty spot at the end?" she whispered, her voice filled with a conspiratorial pride. "Mom says maybe one day my picture will hang there." Liam's eyes widened. "Your mom works here?" he asked, impressed. Zoe's face lit up, a brilliant smile spreading across her features. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a near-silent murmur. "She doesn't just work here. She's the judge. She's in the middle of a huge case right now." The words were barely out of her mouth when a shadow fell over them. Officer Miller, a man whose tired eyes and sagging posture spoke of long, uneventful shifts, had been watching them from a distance. A smirk played on his lips as he ambled over. He ignored Zoe completely, addressing Liam instead. "Hey son, the courthouse isn't a playground. We need to maintain a certain level of decorum here." His gaze, heavy with disbelief, then shifted to Zoe. The smirk widened into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "A judge, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with condescending amusement. "That's a pretty big story for a little girl." He leaned against the nearby pillar, crossing his arms as if settling in for some entertainment. "Tell me, is your mom the one who cleans the courtroom, or does she work in the cafeteria? Because I know all the judges here, and I don't think I've seen her." Zoe's smile vanished, replaced by a flush of crimson that crept up her neck. The public, casual dismissal of her mother felt like a physical slap. She hugged her worn backpack to her chest, a makeshift shield against his words. "I'm not telling a story," she said, her voice small but firm. "My mom is Judge Evelyn Hayes." Officer Miller threw his head back and let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed in the cavernous hall. The sound was loud enough to make a passing lawyer pause and glance over. "Judge Hayes," he boomed, drawing more attention. "Oh, of course. The Honorable Judge Hayes. I've been working security in this building for 5 years, kid. I know the judge." He paused for dramatic effect, then bent down, bringing his face uncomfortably close to Zoe's. His voice dropped to a patronizing whisper. "Listen, it's sweet that you want your mom to be someone important. All kids do. But lying is a serious thing, especially in a place like this." The word lying hung in the air, thick and poisonous. People were starting to stare now. A woman waiting for her hearing pretended to read a pamphlet, but her eyes were fixed on them. Liam tugged nervously at Zoe's sleeve. "Zoe, maybe we should just be quiet," he whispered, his face pale. But Officer Miller wasn't finished. He straightened up, puffing out his chest, and addressed the small, unofficial audience he had gathered. "See? This is what happens," he announced, gesturing toward Zoe with a sweep of his hand. "A little girl with a big imagination. It's harmless, I guess, but we have to teach them to respect the truth, respect the law." He was no longer just talking to a child. He was performing, casting himself as the wise authority figure and Zoe as the foolish, dishonest child in need of his correction. Tears welled in Zoe's eyes, hot and stinging, but she refused to let them fall. She blinked them back, the blurry faces of the onlookers swimming in her vision. She remembered her mother's words from a conversation they'd had just last week, after a boy at school had made fun of her hair. "Never let someone else's ignorance become your reality. Zoe, your truth is yours." Drawing strength from that memory, she met Officer Miller's gaze. "Why is it so hard for you to believe me?" she asked, her voice trembling but clear. "Is it because I—" She trailed off, unable to say the words, but the question hung in the air, heavy and understood. "Because I'm black?" Miller immediately threw his hands up in a gesture of mock surrender. "Whoa there. Let's not make this into something it's not," he said defensively, his voice laced with false sincerity. "This has nothing to do with anything except you spinning a little fairy tale." He turned to a man in a wrinkled suit who was watching with a frown. You see what I mean? They always try to make it about something else. The man in the suit just shook his head and walked away, but the damage was done. Miller had painted her as not just a liar, but a manipulator. A wave of helplessness washed over Zoe. Here, in this building dedicated to facts and evidence, her truth was being treated like a joke, and there was nothing she could do to prove it. The weight of every stare, every whisper pressed down on her. But then, another of her mother's lessons surfaced. Courage isn't the absence of fear, baby girl. It's speaking up even when your voice shakes. Zoe took a deep, shaky breath. She wiped her damp cheeks with the back of her hand and stood up from the bench, her small frame radiating a sudden, unexpected defiance. My mom will be out soon, she announced, her voice gaining strength with each word. She's taking a recess to come get me for lunch. Then you'll see. This was it, the shift from defense to offense. She was no longer just a victim of his ridicule. She was issuing a challenge. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Miller's face, but it was quickly replaced by his signature smirk. "Oh, I'll wait," he said, leaning back against the marble pillar with his arms crossed. "I've got nothing but time. I can't wait to meet the famous Judge Hayes." The air grew thick with anticipation. The silent audience didn't disperse. They, too, were waiting for the verdict. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. The grand clock on the far wall ticked with agonizing slowness, each click echoing Zoe's frantic heartbeat. Officer Miller remained in his spot, a smug sentinel guarding a narrative he was sure was true. He made a show of checking his watch, then sighing dramatically, as if to say, "See? I told you so." Zoe's confidence began to waver under the relentless pressure. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing she could disappear. What if her mom's case ran late? What if she had forgotten about lunch? The whispers around her grew louder, a mix of pity and amusement. "Poor kid," someone muttered. "He really shouldn't be doing this." Another said, but no one intervened. Just as a single, traitorous tear finally escaped and traced a hot path down her cheek, a heavy oak door at the end of the hall swung open with a soft whoosh. A wave of silence washed over the hall. Every head turned. Stepping out from the hallowed space of Courtroom 4B was Judge Evelyn Hayes. She was a vision of indisputable authority. Her black judicial robe flowed around her, commanding respect. The ornate medallion of her office rested on her chest, catching the light. Her expression was one of calm focus, her posture radiating a power that was earned, not given. She moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that made people instinctively step aside. Officer Miller's smirk froze, then melted from his face like ice in the sun. He pushed himself off the pillar, his body snapping to a rigid, almost military attention. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty mask of pure shock. He had seen her picture in memos, seen her from a distance on the bench, but he had never imagined this. Judge Hayes's eyes scanned the hall, searching, and then they found her daughter. Her stern expression softened instantly. She didn't seem to notice the crowd at first, her focus entirely on the small, tear-streaked face of her child. "Zoe, honey, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice warm and clear, easily carrying across the now silent hall. The cross-examination took longer than I expected. She reached Zoe and gently brushed the tear from her cheek. Then, and only then, did she lift her gaze to the pale, sweating officer standing stiffly beside them. Her eyes narrowed, the warmth vanishing, replaced by a cold, analytical fire. "Officer," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone. "Is there a problem here concerning my daughter?" Officer Miller's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The swagger and condescension he had worn so comfortably just moments before had evaporated, leaving him exposed and utterly powerless. Your Honor," he stammered, his voice cracking. I was just making sure she was okay. There was no problem." Zoe, feeling the solid, reassuring presence of her mother beside her, finally let her own emotions pour out. She buried her face in her mother's robe, her small body shaking with sobs. "He didn't believe me, Mommy," she cried, her voice muffled by the thick fabric. "He laughed at me. He told everyone I was a liar." Judge Hayes wrapped a protective arm around her daughter, holding her tight. She didn't take her eyes off Miller. Her gaze was steady, not with anger, but with a piercing, judicial intensity that seemed to strip him bare. "Officer Miller," she said, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of the entire courthouse. She read the name from his badge without glancing down. "Explain to me, on what grounds did you determine my daughter was a liar? Was it based on evidence? Or was it based on an assumption you made the moment you saw her?" The hall was utterly still. The onlookers held their breath, captivated by the unfolding drama. This was no longer about a child's hurt feelings. It was a trial, right here in the Marble Hall. "This building," Judge Hayes continued, her voice resonating with authority, "is a symbol of justice. And the bedrock of justice is the presumption of innocence. Yet you, a sworn officer of the court, appointed my 11-year-old daughter guilty. Guilty of lying. Why? Because her reality did not fit within the narrow confines of your expectations?" Miller swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "Your Honor, I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Judge Hayes countered, her voice sharp as a gavel strike. "A mistake is a typo in a report, officer. What you did was an act of prejudice. You used your uniform, a symbol of trust and authority, to publicly humiliate a child. You made her feel small and invisible in a place where she should feel safest." She paused, letting the words sink in, not just for Miller, but for everyone listening. "My daughter's pride in her mother is not a fairy tale. It is her truth, and you try to steal that from her. So, I will ask you again why." Under the crushing weight of her words and the silent judgment of the crowd, Officer Miller finally broke. The last remnants of his defensive posture crumbled. He looked down at the floor, then at the small girl still clinging to her mother. He saw not a troublemaker or a liar, but a child he had deeply wronged. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He then looked directly at Zoe. "I'm truly sorry, Zoe. I was wrong. I had no right to speak to you that way. I apologize." Judge Hayes watched him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she looked down at her daughter, stroking her hair. "Zoe," she said, her voice soft but loud enough for all to hear, "I want you to listen to me. Your truth is powerful. Never, ever let anyone make you doubt it, no matter what uniform they wear or what title they hold. A person's character is shown not by their power, but by how they treat those they perceive to have none." She gave Miller one last, lingering look, a look filled not with malice, but with profound disappointment. "Officer Miller, I sincerely hope you reflect on what it means to protect and serve all members of this community." Without another word, she squeezed Zoe's hand. "Come on, baby. Let's go get that lunch." As she led her daughter away, a path cleared for them through the crowd. The onlookers watched them go, their faces a mixture of awe and contemplation. The story of what happened in the Great Hall that day would spread through the courthouse like wildfire. It wasn't just about an officer being put in his place. It was a stark reminder that justice isn't just something dispensed from a bench in a courtroom. It's a standard of respect and dignity we owe each other every single day. If you believe that respect is non-negotiable, type comment respect in the comments below. And for more stories that remind us of the power of truth, make sure to subscribe.